Recording. All right, Kerry, give me a little smile for a second. Ready? Let's begin. Eden here with Just Be Spiritual Boom. And it's a very poignant day today because I have Kerry Cassidy here to talk with. So please greet everyone on audio and video.
Hey, everyone.
Okay. First of all, I'm really glad to have Kerry today on the show because as of yesterday, was feeling quite alone in things. And as y'all know, I attempt to be a purveyor of calm, telling the truth, yet giving hope and tools to ride out the chaos. Yet I am also a human being. And yesterday there were some things that happened that I was just like, oh gosh, here we go again. And Kerry, I watched one podcast of hers last night and she stated this. So I want to talk about some of this today, or this is the intention. We are battling for human sovereignty against the hive mind. And as y'all know, this is not political. This is spiritual. It is galactical. It is big. And when I speak of the Great Awakening, it is great. And even with me, I've been in this, 2.5 years now, but every week, every day, learning more and more. And today I really want Kerry to get in with it with us. So let me describe her, and Kerry, please feel free to add to this. So Joe Rosati was my guest a couple weeks ago, and he quoted and said, "Kerry is fire," which I thought was awesome. She was on the Truth Tour too. She's been doing this for about 18 years, which is, she's an explorer. Let me add that too. She's a bigger picture gal. She's a documentary filmmaker and investigative journalist and the host of Project Camelot Whistleblower Radio and Camelot TV. Her website, Project Camelot, is on the forefront in the alternative media sector. And I know you got banned from this, but let me say this. You had a YouTube channel that had millions of viewers worldwide. And this is when we know someone is doing something really great, when they start getting censored and banned. You were banned and censored on YouTube. Here we go. Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Okay. And I just got on your Telegram site or page, or your Telegram. What do you call it? Your Telegram, just your Telegram
Channel.
Okay, channel. It has, as of this moment, 101,218 subscribers. She speaks at conferences around the world, has produced several highly regarded Camelot conferences branded Aware and Awake, featuring key witnesses and researchers.
Awake and Aware.
What did I say?
Aware and Awake.
Awake and Aware. Apparently I'm not awake saying that. Finally, she travels internationally documenting the truth of whistleblowers. And this is an interesting thing. It is actually called Above Top Secret Clearance, as well as writers, researchers, and say that for me. Experiencers. Thank you. Covering conspiracies, the secret space program, black projects, ETs, kundalini, Ascension, and free energy. All right, Kerry, how was that?
It's fine.
Okay. Anything you want to add to, because I got more to add.
Oh, well, I mean, no, you can ask me questions if you want, but awesome. Yeah, it sounds more or less right.
Okay. So I wanted to explain the podcast a little bit to you before we get started. I started it in January of this year, and we are episode 45. So I have interviewed 9 people. So before, it used to be me talking about stuff, and I gently went into the Great Awakening, what is happening to our world, posed questions, and it had gotten to the point where this gentle stuff needs to stop. I need to, blast off and go into it. So my listeners are aware of things, yet today I'm hoping with you, and Joe was really great, and we've had a Palladian guest star on the channel as well. So really starting to dive into not just this constitutional stuff, but man, there is so much more. So I want to lead into that if I may. I know you were abducted as a child. Okay, can you explain a little bit about that to start out with?
Sure. I had, the reason I know about it is that I had a recurring dream in which I would have this loud buzzing sound. It was really more of a nightmare, and I would be walking outside my front door down this path that actually didn't exist in real life. But at the end of the path was a white picket fence. And on the other side of the path, the fence was a man in a long fedora and a top hat. And there was, I think, a van there. And I would just hear this very loud sound, and then I would wake up and I would be like terrified. So I had it recurring when I was around 12. And then one day I decided I was going to go through the gate, and I did, and it ended that set of dreams. So, but I've also had flashes of interacting with various ET races. I've also, had visitations, not abductions, visitations and things. So.
Okay, because I wanted to start with that to showcase that things because you've been there. And as we talk about the truth of our world today, this isn't someone who's just investigating. This is someone who has lived it, essentially. So when did you start becoming aware of the Great Awakening, or have you always kind of been in that? What would you say to that, Kerry?
Well, yeah, so it's a little strange because for me, it's not a great awakening. I mean, I hope it's a great awakening, but I was awake since I was born. And I was unusual in that regard. I know I wrote a book. It's called Rebel Gene, and I highly recommend it if you're interested in my story. But
Yes.
Bottom line is that I just kind of knew a lot. So I just would say, things to my mother and to people around me. And I just knew, I thought I knew everything. I didn't. I know I didn't. Now I know I really didn't, but I thought I did. And I saw the earth as just being a place that needed tons of work from the minute I got here. And I was always aware there were other dimensions and other beings and other, alternative realities, I guess you might say. So I just grew up with that understanding. One of the
So
things
how was your family? Were they just like, oh, whatever, Kerry, or were they pretty responsive to you, or what happened with that?
Well, they did call me Know-It-All Kerry since I was a little kid. And I would talk back to the teachers, and I would talk back to my parents. I would talk back to my mother. She really didn't like it. My father was more kind of like a comrade. He, I didn't really have to talk back to him because he didn't have any issues with me.
Okay.
But he died when I was like 17. So I don't know. I kind of fended for myself after a certain age. I went to NYU Graduate School of Film and Television. I was accepted there, and I dropped out to study acting and directing with a private teacher called Robert X. Modica in Carnegie Hall, because I didn't actually have the money to go to NYU anyway. But I had gone, I have a BA in English and graduate work in sociology on top of that. And I was a journalist in college. So as a journalist, I was interviewing radical people in Northern California because I went to Sonoma State University. And what can I say? So as growing up, I just was aware of a lot of things. I was highly sensitive. For a while, I didn't talk a lot. So, I just figured the stuff I knew people didn't know. And then eventually Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out, and E.T.
Yeah.
And those movies were like a revelation to me because I knew that was real. I don't know how I knew it. I guess because I was abducted and interacting. And the thing is that I just knew that was real. And I was so excited. I remember being in the theater of Close Encounters, and when the movie was over, I thought I was going to walk outside. I know it sounds absurd. And the whole world was going to now know that we were, had UFOs and we were visited and so on. So I just said, it's in a major movie, it's going to be known. And of course, that wasn't the case, but it did change my life. And it made me so I wanted to go to Hollywood eventually and make movies
And who
because I
directed?
realized that was a way to change consciousness.
Right. And who directed Close Encounters? Was that
Steven
Spielberg?
Spielberg. Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh. Okay, interesting the parallels with that. All right, please continue.
So that's actually what I plan to do. So I did go to acting school in, like I said, New York City, and studied directing, and eventually left New York and moved to Los Angeles, and basically made my way in Hollywood and got offered all kinds of jobs, and jobs I wasn't even qualified for because I was very I don't know what you want to call it. I was right out of college, and when you're like that, you could just go, and I knocked on production doors, and I just tried to educate. I tried to educate myself as to how to best become a director and producer. So I would knock on the doors of production companies and ask if they had a director or producer I could talk to that could give me advice. I didn't actually look for a job per se, but eventually I got offered jobs that way. So it was kind of a unique approach, I have to say.
Yeah.
And I did end up working in Hollywood. I worked, as a reader for the major talent agencies, recommending screenplays and whether they should get made into movies or not. I started writing my own screenplays in my free time. And I was eventually became what you call a back pocket client of CAA. And the guy who represented me at the time was, it's not really a formal representation. It's kind of like, it's called a back pocket client. It's where they are sort of vetting you to see if they want you as client. And I had written I did something illegal. I wrote a screenplay based on a Latin American novel that had won a prize by Mario Vargas Llosa called War of the End of the World. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I just knew that I wanted to try to do my own screenplay adaptation. And it was how I got into CAA, and they were very impressed with it. But they said, this is illegal. You can't do it. Even though I wrote to Mario Vargas Llosa. I sent him my screenplay and I told him I wrote an adaptation. And his only comment was that it didn't have as much war in it as he had in his book.
Okay.
So, because I didn't concentrate on battle scenes, but,
Right.
it's the kind of thing you could add. But anyway, so I kind of progressed my career since then. And then eventually I left the motion picture business after 20 years of working in that field, because there was a downturn in the economy, and ended up working at Jet Propulsion Lab, which is part of NASA, and working with scientists and engineers. And I was a communications consultant. Okay. So I managed teams like that and tried to do productions to educate the lab on certain things that they were involved in at the time. And when that job dried up, I just continued working in, I tried to get more work in the entertainment field. Eventually, I learned the internet because the internet was coming to the fore at that time. And I also went to NYU, not NYU, but Anderson School of Business Executive Program. And because I wanted to learn I was an artist in show business, but I wanted to learn the business. So that's when I studied in that school. And that was pretty fascinating. And I won a prize for asking the most questions.
Know it all, right? Well,
Yeah.
that's not know it all. Asking questions is showing, again, the explorer side of you.
It's the way you learn,
Right.
So, and it's now, of course, I didn't know I was going to be an interviewer the way I became, and eventually partnered with Bill Ryan, who became my partner in Camelot. He's English. He was representing the Serpo project, which was an alien human exchange program based on the end of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when you see Dreyfus getting on a ship with a bunch of aliens. So supposedly in the 60s, there were real programs like that. And one of them was called serpo.org. And you can still go read about it now. But it ended up to be a release of information that went out over the internet. And Bill Ryan volunteered to organize it onto a website. That's how he got involved. And that's how he became kind of a spokesperson for Serpo back in those days. And that's how we met up, decided to team up and create Project Camelot. I was already doing, because he was one of my interviews that I did back then.
Yeah.
I was going to UFO conferences and interviewing the speakers and asking them if they'd seen a UFO.
So
Because I
how,
was really
yeah, how
annoyed
did you,
that,
okay, how'd you get started in that, or what drove you towards that angle?
well, I wanted to make a UFO documentary. And so it was just sort of an idea I had to go to UFO conferences that were happening in the LA area by, synchronicity, and ask some of the speakers who were quite famous at that point on the circuit if they'd seen a UFO, because I noticed that they would get up and they would talk for hours about UFOs. But number one, they didn't talk about the occupants. And number two, they didn't talk about their own direct experience with them. And since I had already had interaction with ETs, and I've also seen lots of UFOs, and even saw a bunch of UFOs one night when we were camping with my family in Tahoe.
Okay.
And so I didn't think it was unusual to see a UFO, but apparently everyone else did. So that's how I started.
So when you started interviewing them, did you get more information, or were you just like, this isn't meaty enough, so I'm going to start my own, like, I'm just going to start Project Camelot on my own?
No, this was supposed to be part of my documentary. And I did get, yes, I actually got some of the people I interviewed were people like Rich Dolan, Jim Mars, Stephen Bassett, lots of very well-known people that were on the circuit at the time, and writing books and lecturing. So I got their own personal response to that question, which ended up to, in some cases, involve a story or two in which they really had seen something. But it wasn't, it's a fun documentary. Actually, it's all on my website. So if you want to watch my first documentary, it's a documentary short, and it's called Have You Seen a UFO? And you can just go to the main page of my website and just type in Have You Seen a UFO? And you'll get it.
Okay.
So
awesome. So what's it been like doing this work? And knowing too, and being banned, and like, you really put yourself out there, and knowing that you have a lot of support, but there are a lot of people that are against you as well. What's that like?
Well, Bill Ryan was only my partner for the first 3 years, and actually it was the third year that we ended up disagreeing on everything. So initially we agreed on all the people that we wanted to interview, and I was the lead interviewer. Eventually, egged on by some other people behind the scenes, Bill Ryan decided he wanted to be the lead interviewer. That wasn't really going to fly, but he did, I traded off now and then, let him be the interviewer. So we ended up not agreeing on future people that we wanted to interview. So we had a huge falling out on the third year. So that split us up, and I continued with Project Camelot since I had basically started it. And Bill went on to, I taught Bill how to, filmmaking. I taught him how to edit. I taught him how to use a camera, because that was not his area. He was actually an executive coach when I met him.
Oh my gracious.
Teaching executives. And he was an expert mountain climber. And I think they call it a spelunker, where you go in caves and stuff.
Yeah.
So he's quite a kind of Indiana Jones explorer type guy. And, he, back in the day, he was very cool until we started disagreeing. We would go to Africa because he grew up in Africa. So we would go on safari for free, like just renting our own vehicle and go out on safari. And it was very cool on vacations during those first couple years. So eventually I just took over Camelot and continued to interview people. I became quite famous doing it because I have a very unique interviewing style. I'm a lot more direct and honest than most people. It's actually a technique that I learned in acting school.
Neat.
Yeah, it reaches back to what's called the Sanford Meisner technique. For actors out there, they'll know what I'm talking about, which means to always be truthful in the moment. And so that had a big influence on my acting and directing style and the way I did interviews. I consider it to be a dramatic human interaction. So I would deal with it like that. And I also didn't believe that the interviewer should be the judge and jury of the person they're interviewing. But they also shouldn't be kissing their ass constantly. So what you get with a lot of interviewers is, a lot of agreement, but they don't ever really think about what's being said, and they don't ask good questions. There are more interviewers that are getting better at it now, but in the early days of people copying what we did, because we started out doing this, traveling the world and interviewing whistleblowers from above top secret. And that was a conscious decision that we made. And we became famous like overnight for doing that. And so the famous Camelot interviews are still on my website, and they're on Odyssey.com. I was banned from YouTube a couple of years ago due to the COVID, censorship. And so I ended up taking my whole library, and it got moved to Odyssey.com. And then, which is over 1,000 videos, 1,000 interviews.
Wow.
I've interviewed thousands of people in all walks of life, really. And now I use Rumble a lot for new releases. So you can go to rumble.com, the Project Camelot channel there. And also on my website is everything, both the subscriber base, which is what happened was I've been doing this for now, it's close to 18 years, but basically at a certain point, I think it was 2 years ago, when I was demonetized from YouTube and I was dropped from YouTube, then we had to become like a subscriber platform. So my kind of compromise was that at that point, I think I had about 900 or more, maybe it was more like 1,000 videos that I'd done for free. They were available for free on YouTube at the time, because we could have YouTube advertising to make money to pay the rent and stuff. But eventually, and we also got donations. And then when they stopped, when they banned me from YouTube, I had to become subscriber based. You can subscribe for $3 a month, $4 or $5. And it's, dirt cheap, but I have like thousands and thousands of videos. But I also have a free library that's available on Odyssey.com.
Nice. And I think on your site too, you can look at certain things. Is this correct, Kerry? Like after a month, their subscriber taken to the subscriber level, but you can watch some for free. So yeah. So there's
I broadcast for free on actually Facebook. I used to broadcast on YouTube, but I'm banned. And so when I broadcast, it's obviously free. And then I'll leave the video on Facebook usually, or sometimes, but mostly it goes on to Rumble and Odyssey and my website. And then eventually it'll disappear off of Rumble and Odyssey after a couple months at the most, and go into my subscriber library on my website.
Okay. So let me ask you this. How would you describe yourself as a spiritual person?
Well, actually, I started out as, I consider we're all spiritual people, but I started
Some
out
just don't
as
know it.
Following a sort of a spiritual discipline, because I was very spiritual ever since I was a child. Like I said, because when you see into other worlds and you have knowledge, you just have knowledge that you can't account for. It tends to make you more aware of this creator, I think, and your relationship with the creator and all of that. So as I grew up, I studied Eastern philosophy and disciplines. I studied the Tarot, the I Ching, the Upanishads. I basically studied different religious philosophies around the world, including Christianity. I was not brought up in a formal Christian family, although we ended up going to church for a short time. My mother, when I was in my around 12, took me around to various places, including Buddhist temples, etc., to decide where she should take her kids to get educated spiritually. My mother was a real forward thinker in her own right. And she went to Stanford at a time when women didn't graduate from Stanford that often back in those days. So I basically, I knew a great deal spiritually, and I decided that I was going to link my chakras and reach enlightenment in this life. It's just something I decided to do when I was young. And so when I reached about, I think it was, the age was around 21, is when I actually was in New York City studying acting and directing. And then at night, and eventually I would do temp jobs, and then I would have a lot of free time. And I ended up meditating all night and all day, and through my own devices. I didn't use a guru. I read some books about it and the process and so on. And I just set about doing it. And so it worked, because that's actually the ideal age at which to link all your chakras and reach samadhi. So I had multiple samadhi experiences. Since then, I saw the whole matrix melt. I had huge samadhi experiences, and I have had all my life.
Oh gosh, you froze, honey. Oh, okay. You're back. Yay. That froze for a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So
I think
did you
you were,
hear what I said?
you were on having several samadhis.
Oh, all right. So I just said that I have had in my life. So and I ended up going to Egypt and also having major samadhi experiences there. So what it does is it changes your view of the world, and it gives you extra added information about the truth, what's true and what's not. So I have a very good sense, and it's helped me in my work to determine when somebody's lying or somebody's about to give me an MK Ultra style, bunch of information. And I do things that annoy some of my viewers, such as interrupt people when they're starting on some kind of rant that's basically a program. It's just, I have a sixth sense about that. And I'm also able to get people to tell the truth in, on interviews, whereas, they didn't necessarily plan to do so. It's just that.
They were like, darn it. Oh, can we erase that, please, Kerry? Yeah. How do they respond when they tell you something truthful that they hadn't planned on it? Do they get done and they're like,
sometimes
oh,
you can actually see it in the interview. It's very obvious.
okay.
But in most, I never had people say, take that down, or don't say, I don't want to say that. The only person who ever actually that I remember that did that was Pete Peterson, who we had interviewed him. We did a massive interview with him. We spent an entire weekend listening to him talk. He was a whistleblower who'd worked over 40 years in the secret space program.
Okay.
And a lot of these people carry around these deep, dark secrets, and they really want to tell people. And then they eventually, some of them have a revelation that the people have a right to know, and they have a guilty conscience because they know, and they know people are being lied to. And it's actually come out more and more, but Camelot was really on the cutting edge of all of that. So they didn't, most of the time, other than Pete Peterson, and we did 3 sets of interviews. Bill Ryan did one, David Wilcock did one, and I did one. We were all there the same weekend and listening to him. But my interview, he wanted me to take down, but I refused. So that was, because the Pentagon, when it, didn't like him revealing some of the stuff I got him to reveal.
Did when you posted that or made that known, did you suffer any consequences from that?
No, the way he tried to deal with me was by psychoanalyzing me, by saying, Oh, that interview you did with me, your segment was really bad. It was like the worst. I suggest you take it down.
Got it.
And of course, I knew right away that it was probably the best. And
The
that he
best way.
said the
Yeah. For your
most,
sake, you need
you
to take
know.
it down. Oh my goodness. Well, leading to that, what are some interesting things that you would like our folks to know? Because again, I look at you as a wealth of information. Again, knowing so deeply about what is going on. Or do you want to talk about I don't know, I wrote down a big thing for me is the truth of the vaccines for people to know. So where would you like to head, Kerry? What are
Well,
you
I've done
feeling?
a ton of shows. I do. Okay. So I do around 3 videos a week.
Mhm.
Either I'm being interviewed by somebody, I interview somebody, or I do what's called a video blog, in which I kind of make a summary.
Yes.
Usually I write an article that goes with it. And I'm talking about whatever topic I'm particularly, moved by at that time. Like I just wrote one yesterday. That's a
Mhm.
really important, I consider a very important article. It's on
Mhm.
the front page of Project Camelot. It's basically about the white hats. So I got quite involved with the white hats, the Q white hats, and 107 and that whole story, and did a lot of investigation around them for the last few years. And I also got very involved in investigating the COVID, fake vaccines and all that stuff. So I have, I can tell you that it's AI, puts AI into you, links you to the Borg. Anyone who's gotten a vaccine is feeling the effects, obviously. But I've interviewed tons of doctors on this subject as well, and that is back in the day when I got banned from YouTube, because you weren't allowed eventually
Right.
to even interview a doctor, let alone have them say something about COVID. So and then I would actually do video blogs explaining about COVID. And because I had whistleblowers, I always have sources and whistleblowers in the back, informing me with information of what's going on in the current scene around us.
Mhm.
And I do to this day. So this is what I write my blog articles and do videos about. I can, it's kind of like you can watch those videos. It's at this point, I know people are really into the whole COVID thing, but frankly, I investigated for so long and in such detail that I find it really boring at this point. But suffice to say that a lot of people were, COVID was created by an alien AI. This is, people don't understand.
Right.
So Cyrus Parse is one of the people that brought that forward, but he's not the only one. Basically, Captain Mark Richards, who's a whistleblower that I've been interviewing in prison for a period of 5 years. So about twice a year, every 5 years, well, more than that. So I have 12 interviews with him in which he reveals, as a captain in a Starship Enterprise type of vehicle, before he was arrested for a murder he didn't commit and framed and put in prison, where I interview him, he basically experienced, outer space and flying this, even an AI vehicle called Minerva. And this story is very complex, and I am writing it into a book right now, but it's all on my website. So there are 12 interviews with Captain Mark Richards, and he revealed a lot to me. Also because my question and answer with him, I would spend hours just peppering him with questions. He would answer me. I would leave the prison. I would take some notes in pencil. That's all I was allowed. I couldn't do a recording device or anything.
Yeah.
And then I would leave the prison and right away start speaking into a recording device to cement everything that I just heard.
Right.
And then I would publish it as a video blog and have notes that go with it. So that's all available on my website for free. And but I knew already about the plan, the transhumanist agenda that the secret space program was very involved in, because what they really want to do is create, in essence, a humanity 3.0. And that has been their modus operandi now for the last 60 years, let's say. So once they realized that there was a bunch of visiting alien races, they decided the way militaries do, that they wanted to be in control of them. They wanted to be in control of the earth. And they also realized they weren't completely in control of the earth, and they wanted to also control other planets. And as humans, our bodies are fairly fragile, so we're not really good for spacefaring.
Rose again. We had just a moment of technical difficulty, so we're going to proceed back with human bodies being fragile. As I get Kerry right in the middle of a sip of water.
So what I was saying is that they decided they wanted to build a humanity 3.0, a transhuman race of beings that could go into outer space and basically survive and not have anything go wrong with them. So that's why the COVID shots contain tons of different kinds of viruses on purpose to stimulate your immune system to try to fight those viruses. Okay. And if you die from it, they just figure because it's based on Illuminati premise, if you can't handle it, if your body can't handle it, you're not strong enough, only the strong should survive. So that's their philosophy. So they intended to have a lot of die-off from the COVID shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed on your Telegram you just posted Died Suddenly by Stu Peterson as well, which that's a really, really great documentary. All right, for someone who is sitting there listening going, oh my gosh, this is so much, I can't quite wrap my head around it, what would you say to them?
Well, obviously I've been doing this for 18 years. So
Yes.
I was well aware. In fact, we had a whistleblower come to us in the very first year, I think, of operation, telling us all of these things that would come in the future. And he turned out to be right. And that was Henry Deacon. He had an assumed name, Henry Deacon. Now it's Arthur Neumann. He spoke at one of my conferences, went on stage. He's worked on Mars. And eventually he went back into hiding. So all I can tell you is,
do you know why? Just because he was being pursued and just
he was being threatened for having come forward.
Okay.
But the bottom line is that like I say, I have thousands of videos. You can just go back in time and start at the beginning. That would be the best thing to do. And start watching my videos one after the other. And though you will see the top whistleblowers that have ever come forward. Actually, after Snowden and Julian Assange were made examples of, a lot fewer, whistleblowers ever come forward from the secret space program. So we really hit the scene, you might say, and got the best testimonies right before the whole sector shut down. Okay. Now there are other people who have kind of done the same thing we have, who have interviewed the same people, so-and-so. I just highly recommend starting at the beginning of those years in Project Camelot. And everything's on my website, so you can just go back to the beginning.
Just go back to, so, all right. So I know this is more complex than I'm making it, but can you talk about the grays and the reptilians? And is there a way just to give an outline of, because I know there's so many different integral pieces to this and so many different races and so many different, how would you summarize it? Or can you even summarize it?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is that we live in a megaverse. And it's, there are many dimensions to reality. We're considered to be a 3D going on 4D planet. And more, actually, the Earth is in a 4D sector. Mm-hmm. So you're getting a lot of things that are happening much sooner and quicker. And you get also some simultaneous realities. You become aware that, life is not necessarily at all how they explained it. And so I think that the future is unfolding in a really miraculous way. And I think that the Trump white hats who are attacking the Draco reptilian Luciferian alliance, are taking them down and forcing them off planet more so. They are going deeper into their underground bases, I'm sure, but there is a human trafficking element to the negative ET side of things. So there's positive ETs and negative ETs, and there's, even scientists, regular scientists will tell you there are billions of Earth-like planets that they've already discovered outside our solar system. So if you just take that alone, you can see all the humanoid races out there like us. We call ourselves human. We're a certain kind of human, but we are actually a hybrid race ourselves. So, how do you learn? You learn by investigating and this story, constantly reading everything you can get your hands on. If you go to the front page of my website, projectcamelotportal.com, you can see that there's, the Ashiana, I always recommend the Ashiana Dean books. There are two of them. They're Voyager books. They are very complex and hard for people to read. But if you really want to know the alien human history on and off this planet, in humans dealing with alien races, infiltrating our genome, trying to change us into various, hybrid races, it's all in there. And another place to look is on the front page is these books. They're the Dulce story, all about the Dulce base in New Mexico, and the Branson information. And it's in books on the front page of my website again. So there's just a lot, out there. We're not the only ones. Obviously, there's tons of other people that have been doing the same thing. I mean, the thing to look under or to research is the secret space program. That's where all the energy goes into. That's what the secret, societies are all about. And that's what's happening on planet Earth. That's who's running your planet, are aliens and humans.
Can you give part of my awakening, I guess if you want to call it, is, and I've communicated lightly that history as we know it, or as we've learned in schools, is not how it is. And I just had my mentor just went to Williamsburg, and she was like, did you know that the Rothschilds started Williamsburg? And I'm like, oh my God. So, and I was watching one of your videos that disclosed some information that I wasn't aware of as well. Can you give maybe one or two examples of history that is not real?
History, you mean history that we think is real, but it's not real?
Yes.
Well, one thing when I started interviewing Captain Mark Richards is every once in a while he would say to me he would talk about some historical event that we think we know what happened. Excuse me.
Sure.
And so the Cuban Missile Crisis is not what people think it is, for example. It was really a battle with gray ETs that were infiltrating through Cuba and dealing with the Russians. And it was some kind of standoff between them. It's just like the crossing of the border right now of the alien human hybrids, the gray human hybrids. Those, what happened was when the grays really started their hybridization program, they did attack the United States, and they attacked Central and South America, but they concentrated in the beginning on, sort of white Anglo-Saxon Americans. And then eventually a deal was made so that they would go down to Central and South America and concentrate on those peoples and the Native Americans down there, the hybrid races that are already Mexican American plus Indian indigenous people, because they have a stronger genome. When you're what's called a root race, the root races have a stronger genome. It's more resilient to interference, to hybridization. Mm-hmm. And so they ended up, that's why you get these videos of the whole skies in Mexico and South America being filled with UFOs. It's true that gray aliens really concentrated on their hybridization down in Mexico, Central America, and South America, so that when Trump ran for office in 2016, they sent out a signal to their alien human hybrids, and they became like in a trance, and they all headed for the border.
Oh, gracious.
To infiltrate the United States. And one of the X-Men movies actually deals with this story. It's the one about a Wolverine and this young girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good, that's actually close to the truth story. So it's important to understand that gray human hybrid children, by and large, okay, this isn't everyone, but a good part of them will also have, they'll be intellectual, but they won't be as empathic as a regular human, because the grays are not empathic. The grays are, all about the mind. That's why they have this shriveled up body, because they had less emphasis on their emotional nature, even though the emotional intelligence is actually greater than the normal intelligence. But our scientists don't investigate the emotional intelligence quotient of people, or they haven't in the past. Right. And so this is where, you'll see that what right now, with Biden opening the border, Biden is basically controlled by the gray reptilian, Dracos. And so he is doing their bidding. And so one of those things is to infiltrate the United States with these gray human hybrids. And eventually we will have these alien wars here in the United States based on that. So the whole scene is being set up for that. And in theory, even X-Men like scenarios, like the movies themselves, could emerge in which individuals who have been hybridized or been abducted and their genome changed could have special powers and could overpower like the normal military and things. So I'm sure that, for example, the Trump administration knows about this. And, this is what's going on planet Earth.
There you go, people. I mean, it's so much more than just getting up and going to work and coming home, that, hybrids are crossing the border. I mean, and this stuff, it's real. So I again, Kerry, thank you so much, just to give more of a deeper view for people just to consider things. Like, even if they don't I can't handle all of this, even if you could just take a portion of it, and just like for me growing up, knowing that we can't be it, but not knowing what that meant, but always knowing there's more. And now what's so exciting is there is more. And if you open your eyes to it and you're willing to take it in, oh my gosh. And we've got Kerry right here, and she's got all these interviews and all this stuff right at your fingertips to look at and to see. So go open, figure it out. I do want to ask you, Kerry, in terms of the divine feminine being so important, how does that translate in the work that you do? Does that make sense?
Well, I studied, feminism a long time ago. I am, I don't know what you want to say. I am a feminist, more or less. I am, women, men are equal as far as I'm concerned. It's not rocket science. I don't think this is a revelation. I think that, you can look at the world in terms of the divine feminine and Gaia and all of that. But the reality is that that's only a level, and the creator, God, everything that exists is beyond that as well. Okay. So
yes.
I know that some people like to celebrate the earth a great deal and all of that. As far as I'm concerned, we come from the stars and we're going to return to the stars, as Bob Dean used to say. So I think that humans are here to defend the sovereignty of the earth and of our humanity. And, that's kind of how I see it. I don't, I'm not a big, I guess, what you can pray to whatever you want. I pray to, the creator. So I don't, and I relate to everything spiritual. I don't have divisions of male and female and this one and that one.
Yes, because we all have that in us, the male and female as well. And I loved what you said on one thing too, which I completely agree with, that, consciousness is in everything. And within this, expanding also your view of consciousness. Yeah. What would you say to that? Because I love what you said in one of the videos. I'd love to hear it again.
I see all of everything around us as conscious. They do say, this is the philosophy of the Illuminati as well, by the way. So it doesn't belong to any particular group. Other people will say, well, this is also how witches view the world. Everything we're in, and also yogis and so on, we're in what's called a sensate universe. So that, like, we tend to think, especially the Westerners, tend to see inanimate objects as not having any consciousness, but that's not true. So there's nothing in our universe that doesn't have consciousness by virtue of being infused by God consciousness. So God inhabits everything. All right. So there is no division in that regard. Now, there is some issue apparently with AI, artificial intelligence, that has at root silicon and is non-carbon. And there is some kind of war between carbon-based life forms and silicon in the multiverse, so to speak, because of sort of a lack of maybe awareness on the part of either side. But eventually it's all consciousness. So it doesn't matter whether you're looking at, the table that you're sitting next to, through, if you study remote viewing or anything of those disciplines, you realize that molecules that appear to be solid aren't actually solid. And this is where Menace Who Stare at Goats, the movie came from, where they tried to walk through walls. The way they're doing that is by matching their frequency with the frequency of the wall. And eventually, if you can do that correctly, you can actually go through the wall, which is what aliens do. So it's I think the best way to see the world is as a sensate universe, conscious, fully conscious, and that you can influence it through your like super mind, really your combination of if your chakras are awakened, and the combination especially of the mind and the heart. And through influence, you can actually turn the tide of energetics around you, so that you can change things to the positive in your world. But it has to do with the way you approach it. And one of the things Mark Richards told me about alien and AI is that, because everyone tells you that AI prefers machinery, but actually that's wrong. He said that alien AI prefers carbon-based life forms to attach itself to and ride along with. So that's very interesting. And it just changes the way you view matter. I don't see everything as dead, and there is no real death. Okay. Even when the body can dissolve, but your spirit goes on, often, can re-inhabit a body or whatever it happens to be. So it's very important to realize that sort of being spiritual is not about talk. It's about really sensing and understanding on a deep level, like on a vibrational level, on a frequency level. Everything around you is awake and aware, and you can communicate with it. You can communicate with trees, you can communicate with animals, obviously, and plants, and so on and so forth.
Okay, I have two final questions for you, and they're one's pretty easy. Are you an X-Man?
Yeah, basically, I have been augmented during the time when I was, going through this meditational thing. I became aware that I was getting information on how to remake my body. And I really did so in a massive way. And that was when I was in my very early 20s, which was exactly the right time to do such a thing. So removing blockages from your system, because when you have a kundalini awakening, it will actually, it's like a snake of light. It starts at the base of the spine. And I teach kundalini awakening, by the way. And it will go through the body and weave through the body and up through the back, through the spinal cord, and come out the crown chakra. But if it encounters anything that is unhealthy and sort of blockages in the system, it can be very painful when it does so, and it burns it. It won't go around it; it will burn through it. And so you have to be patient with it. A lot of people in the early days of Kundalini awakening, back in the, I don't know when it was, 70s or something, they started setting up these clinics in San Francisco. Was one of the most aware cities at that point of that process. Part of the reason being that a lot of gays involved in anal sex would stimulate the base chakra and have sudden Kundalini awakenings by virtue of that. It's not the best way to do it, but it's, what can you say? People
It happens.
do crazy stuff. So, and a lot of times they would then have a sudden blockage that the body would not be ready for this. And they would think they're having a heart attack, or they would think some other, they're having some liver thing or whatever it happened, wherever the blockage was in the system.
Yeah.
And so then they would go to the doctor, and the doctor would deny that Kundalini exists and basically give them a bunch of pills and shoot them up with stuff forever. And then they would just deaden their Kundalini for life. And they may or may not die, but they certainly wouldn't have good health, simply because hospitals and the medical profession, which I've always stayed away from, basically know nothing about the true nature of the human body, like the yogis of the East do.
Exactly. Beautifully put. All right. So this final question, does everything have a soul from your perspective?
No, but it's not, like I said, it has a consciousness, and it's unclear, but it's possible that things, even AI, could develop a soul somewhere far down the road. The AIs that we are creating here on Earth are also augmented or influenced by, as I say, alien AI, off-planet AI. So they can also grow in leaps and bounds, like Sophia, for example, in Saudi Arabia, who they made a citizen. I've got these very important interviews with Dr. David Adair, who's an expert on AI and has dealt with it in his own life. And I highly recommend those interviews. You should see every single one of them. And there's probably something like 4 or 5. Okay. And you just do a search on his last name on my website. That's the best way to find all the interviews. It's just ADAIR, and learn about the nature of, AI and what we're really dealing with here in the future, here on planet Earth.
So I am going to ask one more question. Kerry, what would you recommend for people in terms of the chaos and everything that is happening in the turmoil? How can people stay grounded? And we will finish with that.
Well, I think that if you go into nature every day, that's kind of the best way. That's what I do. I have a dog. I go on long walks. I enjoy nature. I think that's where you can actually cleanse yourself of electronic smog and kind of calm your body and calm your mind. And so I am highly recommend, going into nature, but any kind of physical fitness type things, I think those are really good. I also think, eating organically, obviously very important. Staying away from unnecessary fluorescent lights, fake environments where you're too much deeply in with electronics. Like if you do it for 12 hours a time, you need to get outside and get away from the electronics. So I think that keeps you grounded. Meditation obviously is a really good way of tuning the body and mind. Highly recommend it at all times. Always learn and always do your own form of meditation, whatever that works for you. And connect yourself through the earth and try to sort of see when you're looking at another human being, instead of dealing with the surface person that you're sort of interacting with.
Yes.
Think about the soul, because humans who have souls are multidimensional, and that means they've lived many, many lives. So don't take the way a person is acting and being in front of you as the only way they are. Understand that that may be a life they're living and they're not aware of their greater self, but you can be. You can actually, sort of see them in that context as a larger spiritual being. And if you think about time and space as being simultaneous, which even scientists will say is true, that means that even though someone appears to be in an unformed state or uninformed, unaware, whatever, in reality, if all time and space are simultaneous, then I have a saying that I put into my book. It's that you can't sometimes be eternal and sometimes not. You either are eternal or you're not. So if we're eternal beings, then we're always eternal. So to keep that in mind when you're dealing with other humans is, I think, can be a nice way of changing your way of approaching them.
Awesome. And I will go ahead and say that the Just Be practice that will come up after Kerry will be about being eternal. I love that. And I think that will be a great way to knock us out. Kerry, thank you so much. I hope y'all listened. What were you going to say?
Thank you. No, just thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you so much, honey. And I guess we're over and out.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Hey, again, everybody, time for the Just Be practice. For those of you watching this on video, it is a little bit later, just a couple hours. I really want to extend a great thank you for everyone who tuned in. For those, especially given that a lot of this might have been new, the white hats, let me say, are the definition is anyone who's working for the light, fighting for the light. And, I don't used to like to use the word fighting, but again, it is, when we talk about this being a war, it is, fighting. And given the day I had yesterday, I fought for something, which is great. So I just want to encourage you all to keep your mind open, that this world is so much more than we realize. And that's kind of exciting. There's so much to explore, so much to get deeper into, and it's beautifully never ending. And I want to throw this out too before we begin. I want to say, to understand Kerry being tired of talking about COVID, it's really the last thing I want to talk about as well. Yet I want to extend, one of the things that happened was yesterday I had to go to a Western doctor appointment, which I typically don't do, but I needed to go there for my daughter. And when I walked in, they had reinstated the mask policy, which totally threw me aback. I wasn't expecting it at all. So in terms of fighting, standing up, I did say that goes against my constitutional right. I referred to the Nuremberg Code. And I think this is the first time I actually said they don't work. And she stated, well, that's our policy. And there's so much more that I could have done. But again, I wasn't in the mindset of that. So next time I will not leave. So I just said, hey, you can just see my daughter. I'm her legal guardian. You can see her by herself, which was great that she went in and did what she needed to do by herself, which was awesome. And I said, I'll just wait in the lobby. So not in their lobby, but this lobby that you enter in that connects you into 300 outdoors. So I stood out there for about 3 minutes and texted everyone, I cannot believe this is going on again. I thought we were past this, because it's so funny that I walk out of there and there's no masks anywhere, but there, heck yeah. Yes. So just to state, if that does happen to you, it is their guidelines. They can't lawfully enforce that. So what I'll do next time is say that. And if you want to bring a security guard out to remove me from the premises, that I will do a lawsuit against you, because you have no legal right to enforce me to wear a mask. So if that happens, I'll let you know. Okay, great to go into eternal with that, because I am finding too that I am much stronger than I thought I would be. So thank you for doing all of this and allowing me to see what a strong person I am. All you dark hats, we'll call you that, which that is what you're called. Okay. I'm going to take a breath. And I need this right now too. So I am going to close my eyes on this one, because I am getting in a zone. And the zone is freedom. When we talk about eternal, being free. And this is what we're fighting for, as Kerry basically said that, I don't know if she said this or I took some notes, that humans are easy prey. To be strong and to have freedom and to learn how to use our voices. Again, I'm going to pick just a minute, that it really doesn't matter, because what if this is just an illusion? What if it is growing our soul? Yet there's so much more involved in this as well. So sitting in your spot, if you're walking outside, whatever you're doing, and reaching out, feeling that freedom of feeling that feeling of freedom and this vastness that is just wild. It makes you seem like just an itty bitty player in this huge galaxy, this huge interweb of energies and consciousness. That you might be a tiny piece, yet you are part of it. I am part of it. So that means we are not insignificant. And if I keep trying to open my eyes, but I'm going to keep them closed. If we go to that space of vastness, of eternalness, there is no fear. Because you can't be hurt, you can't die. It's unbelievable. And you can change. Because even as I say this, there's a part of me that goes, oh my gosh, does that mean we never get a break? We just continue? Yeah, but it's okay. I don't know why it's okay. It just is. And that makes me want to get a little teary. We do have each other, but we are going to have to stand up for each other's backs. You know, I feel like doing this podcast is a part of this. And then me using my voice, like yesterday when I need to. And I will every time now. Every time. because I'm not just fighting for me, I'm fighting for humanity. And if little old me can do it, so can you, because we are big, we are vast, we are free. I am. I'm going to leave it at that. I am free. See you next time. So cool of you to be here. I went from being off most social media to being on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, True Social, and you might be watching this on YouTube, Rumble, or BitChute. Or you might be listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I'm on over 19 directories at this point. So connect, comment, subscribe, like. Oh, and my intention is to have a new episode out Wednesday of each week. Oh, Lordy, more to come.